And welcome to another episode of The Focal Thought. My guest today is Robyn Landis. How are you, Robyn?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks for coming on the show today. So, Robyn, you are an ACE certified fitness professional, a transformational health coach, a best-selling author, nutritionist, herbalist, and Reiki healer. And the core of your work is centered around spiritual mentorship, which is rooted in self-love and joyful self-nourishment, which essentially lends itself to an act of service and devotion. And that's really nice because, one of the concepts of bhakti yoga is, giving yourself to, what you ascertain God to be, to, sort of vocationally devoting yourself to life. So I really like that part over there. And you've got your book, actually one of many books, Herbal Defense. And
Hmm.
you're also an award-winning songwriter, which is pretty neat.
Yeah.
So welcome to the
You're a
show.
musician too, actually, aren't you?
Yes, yes, in a past life and on and off
Hmm.
in this life,
Cool, I understand.
time permits. So I wanted to ask you, right on your website, and I'll put your website contact in the show notes as well. You've got this sort of paragraph that you put there, which I'm going to read, and it really caught my attention. And it goes like this: self-care as a sacred practice, age less, live more. Enjoy the body and energy that serves your fullest expression. Nourish your whole self and life. Get strong, lean, and resilient naturally. Know exactly what you need and give it to yourself with love. Be deeply happy, living exceptionally healthy for life, for good, joy fueled. That's really nice. That's awesome. How did you come up with that?
Um, hmm, because I just kind of channeled it. I don't know. I mean, I'm a writer, probably a writer first and foremost in a sense. I have a lot of different passions, obviously, and health being one of them, but I'm a writer, so I'm an author, and when I really want to express something, I just come up with the words, and I wanted to put something obviously at the top of my website that I thought would really express the heart and the core of not just what I do, but what I want people to have. What I feel like is possible. That I feel like too many people aren't getting at, but we can. And that I'd like to play my little role in helping as many people as possible reach that possibility, which is to have what you just read. So, yeah.
And what I really like is, I mean, you've encumbered a lot of different facets of, life and vitality in this paragraph. For instance, age less, live more. So,
Hmm.
reduce the aging process, and within that time frame, have maximum capacity for, the utmost passionate life that you can have. And with that, enjoying the body that you have. Not too many people enjoy their bodies. Some people are not conscious of, their body.
Right.
So, the energy, because, what uses the body if it doesn't have energy to, move it, and, to move it around, and to get the things you want physically, because, the body is something that if it lays at rest, it'll stay at rest, right? You need that will, that internal energy to pick up your
Hmm.
body and move and do things. Nourishing your whole self and life. Nourishing is important. I mean, in Qigong, there's a very important term of nourishing your qi,
Hmm.
because we're sort of in this sort of system, or pattern, where we just have constant energy leaks, in mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So taking the time just to sort of reset, just take away some moments that you can take a break from life, disconnect and recharge yourself. Not too many people do that. It's the equivalent of recharging your car. And at the end of it, by doing that, having a happy life, which is joy fueled, because there's always that nice distinction between happiness and joy, right?
Right. Yes. Not a lot of people really pay attention to that distinction, I think. So
Sure.
very cool that you kind of call that out.
So what would be your advice to someone who, okay, they've read this paragraph, they've got sort of some motivation, they're a bit charged, they want to do something. What's the first step someone should take?
Well, of course, things can be individual and it depends on where the person is. If I want to speak really generally, I would say that for people that I work with, I I say this a lot. I think there's There's a piece to well-being, health, and nourishment that is about knowing and knowledge and doing. There's sort of like there's the what to do and how to do it part that people may need. It's like assessing what people, what's missing, what kind of fuel and nourishment is missing from your life. And, because there can be many areas, it could be food, it could be movement, it could be rest and sleep, it could be, relaxation and unstressing. It could be nature time. It could be creativity. It could be a lot of things. People focus a lot in this culture on diet and exercise, which are words I don't even like. I like to say food and movement because I'm big on conscious language. And I think we could just speak so much more positively about all this. But so, there's that doing part of it. And, I often tell people that it's not that that's unimportant because what we do does matter, of course. And I would say that what we do is generally with people I work with, it's like 20 to 30% of what we end up working on. So it's not zero. It doesn't mean we don't pay any attention to what are you doing and what are some things that might be helpful for you to do. But 70 to 80% of it is mindset. It's spiritual, or it's however you want to think about it. It's psychological, spiritual. It's how you're thinking, how you're seeing, how you're relating to all of this, how you're speaking about it. What lens are you looking, at it all through? And so we work on that because, you pointed out my words, and those words are very conscious. They are chosen very carefully. To speak about nourishment is a different thing than to speak about losing weight or getting healthy or lowering your blood pressure or sticking to your regimen. You know what I mean? Very different thing to talk about getting nourished, being well, getting vibrant, fueling your body, nourishing what most matters to you. You know what I mean? So where I start people really is both with an assessment of what are some of the needs physically, but also where are you in your relationship to all of this, to health, fitness, and well-being? How do you talk about it? How do you feel about it? How do you think about it? Are you in what I call diet thinking? Do you use language that is negative and is going to bring you down and make it harder for you? Or how can we basically change your conversation and raise your consciousness so that you're feeling good about it? You're going to love it. You're going to want to do it. And then the doing stuff becomes much easier. Yeah, you might have to learn some things. Yeah, you might have to change some things, but it's not the sort of, it doesn't come from a place of, we're going to give you a plan to follow or you're going to stick to your regimen. It comes from, wow, you're going to get really connected to what matters to you, to what you're here for, to what you love, to what you care about. And then we're going to look at how can you best fuel that? How can you be best nourished to give to that, to engage with that, to serve that? And then it becomes all one thing. There isn't like a separation between your health and fitness plan and your life. It's just you're living your life and you want to live your life well because you want to enjoy life and serve life and give to life and receive and all those things. And you just, then you're just then information becomes not stuff you have to follow or get yourself to do and twist your arm. It becomes just very useful stuff to integrate into how you naturally want to live. So I hope that, I know there's kind of a long answer, but that's really the conversation that I have with people. It's not like a very sort of completely physical assessment. Again, that's a 20 to 30% piece, but it's really, the whole thing is really about conversation, language, mindset, thinking, your relationship to, it's really about your consciousness, honestly, which sounds lofty, but I feel like if we actually addressed it that way, then more people would be naturally taking amazing care of themselves without it being a struggle. That's my experience and my view.
Well, that's very true because, too often, we find that we're sort of, human beings, but really we're just sort of, trying to be human. So instead of, operating from our bodies and trying to sort of, achieve consciousness, we're actually consciousness, caught up in body form. So when you talk about that, you mentioned that spiritual part of yourself, even for someone such as myself, before I try to figure out my work or career, or before I try to figure out my family, or even before I try to figure out my own sort of growth and personal care, and my own sort of things I need to study and learn, and my own mental development, my emotional development. It all starts with the spiritual development. It has to start with that, because I think that's
Hmm.
what's really going to ground you, right, for everything else.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And then when you mention, just look at sort of the 20 to 30%, it's not that you need a complete overhaul in most cases. It's just, maybe some fine tuning. And it starts with, what do you want to achieve? And then, take it from
Exactly.
there, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I have a sort of I have an approach that I think is very makes a lot of sense. It's very logical. It goes in a reasonable order, whereas I think a lot of people approach, I think our culture tends to approach health and fitness in a kind of a backwards order. What I mean by that is I have this pyramid that I created. And it's sort of like, for those who are familiar with like Maslow's hierarchy, where there's the hierarchy of needs, and at the bottom there's food and shelter and whatever, and then you can go up to the top where you can focus on other things when you have your basic needs met. And it's very similar. I call it like my hierarchy of nourishment. And at the base, I have what I call the pillars of nourishment, which are food, movement, rest, and unstressing. And those are like the really big, basic things that I want to see people have those pillars firmly in place. Obviously, not, there's no such thing as perfection, but it's, just having a solid ground. You're basically creating a foundation to stand on in order to reach up and stretch for the other things that you want. And the reason I consider those the pillars is because generally I have found that if those pillars are not in place, the other things that you do don't tend to help as much. They're kind of like going through the holes in the foundation. The other sort of things that people try to do tend to not make as much of a difference. So if you're not eating good, healthy, whole food, if you're not sleeping, if you're not resting, if you're not moving your body, if you're super stressed out and don't have a healthy way of working with that in your life. Because I'm not going to say eliminate stress. Who can do that? Come on. I mean, I'm realistic, but it's about how are you working with that in your life, and mitigating it, working with it, transmuting it. And so if you have those things in place, then you can really look at other nourishments, which I think are very important. Things that I think people tend not to look at in their myopic kind of hyper focus on diet and exercise, which people think of when they think of health and fitness. But the truth is, I think of nourishment as being not only food and movement and rest, but things like relationships and community and art and creativity and nature and so all kinds of spiritual practice. And I would put herbs and things like that in there. And I would put, I was just talking to a friend the other day about climate and how a lot of people don't they think that's kind of like, oh, you just got to live with where you live. And sometimes because life is complicated, you do, and you can't just up and move. But, for example, I moved from Seattle, very wet, cold, gray climate, which it might be really healthy for some people, but it wasn't for me. And I moved to the desert Southwest where the sunshine and the warm, dry was really right for me. So I needed that to be nourished. So, there's some stuff we all need to be nourished, kind of like commonalities at the base. And then there are our unique individualities. Like some people might need a lot of travel to be nourished. Some people might need less travel. They're traveling too much and they're stressed out and exhausted. So, and then at the tip of the pyramid are the hacks. The tip of the pyramid is where, it's like the coconut oil and the coffee and the matcha and the apple cider vinegar and whatever the hack du jour, and the truth is some of those are like the little micro tweaks, and it's not that those things are irrelevant. I would say that, if you hand me a bunch of them and asked me about them, I would probably say some of them are very helpful. And so, some of them I would say, meh, not so much. I don't think very much of that one. And people might disagree, but the point is that even the best ones that I think are fantastic still aren't going to help you if you don't have your pillars in place. You know what I'm saying? So even if there's something like, let's say, mushrooms, like reishi and cordyceps and, all the adaptogenic mushrooms. Okay. I think they're fantastic. I love them. But do I think that, if you're just living a really overall unhealthy life, super stressed, not sleeping, eating, terrible processed food, all the time, or starving yourself all the time, or eating, fast food or whatever. And then you're not moving your body. You just sit on the couch all the time. You never get outside. Like, do I think that a little, reishi mushroom is going to magically make everything great for you? No. For me, it's like a next level thing because I've kind of got the base in place. But there is a sort of progression that I think it's important to. It's not that you can't do some of these things simultaneously, but I just feel that our culture tends to obsess almost exclusively over those micro tweaks at the top of the pyramid. And then they don't understand why they're not getting quote unquote results. Like, I drank some apple cider vinegar and my belly fat didn't go away. Yep, that's how it's going to be because you have to look at your food and your movement and your rest. So, yeah, for most, you have to make an assessment of what's missing for you. Some people are sleeping really well, but they're eating really poorly. Some people are, eating really well, but they're not getting any movement. Whatever it is, you make that assessment. But the thing that is still always most important to me in my work that I think makes it different is that what I'm also going to really look at with the person is whatever it is that you discover you could do better, like that there's more that you could do. There's something that would be helpful for you to do. And I'm very careful how I talk. You can hear me being very careful with my words. I'm not going to say change your habits or, things you should do, but it's more like, oh, when you discover that there are some things you could be doing that would, really make you look and feel much better, that could really be more supportive and more nourishing for you. When you discover what those things are, you're going to want to do them. If our language and our thinking isn't in this cultural paradigm I call diet thinking, and it's just in a much more conscious and aware place where you're connected to your life and what you care about and what matters, and you're like, hey, I want to take good care of myself because I'm needed, and there are things I want to do, and there are things that I'm here for. And it doesn't have to be some giant lofty thing. For some people it is. For some people, it can be your family, your work, your relationships, just things you want to enjoy. But there is a profound, usually, disconnect between those things and the efforts people are making to change their quote unquote habits, which is a very dry, unpleasant word, I think. And so there's a constant struggle. People are trying to change in this very small, limited, narrow paradigm of like, I should do this and I shouldn't do that, and I need to get in shape, and I'm trying to fix this. And it's very grim, it's very dry, it's very negative. And the truth is, who wants to do that? People complain, I can't do it, or health practitioners complain people aren't doing it, they won't do it. It's like, yeah, because listen to how you're talking about it, and look at how disconnected and divorced it is from the person's life and passion and what they love. And I feel like if we bring those things together, and that's what I love doing, and I don't see it being done enough. But I'm hoping to, that's what I feel like part of what I'm here to do is to sort of hopefully change that, to bring more consciousness to that we need to bring together the important things in life and make it a real choice, really bring joy and generosity and love and service to these kinds of healthy choices, and make it positive and purposeful and not dry and negative and limited and separate from life,
Got it. So your pyramid essentially is a 3-tier pyramid, if I understood.
That's correct.
Level, you've got the internal conditioning, which is the human physiological needs, such as sleep, movement, hydration, etc. Then you've got the next level, which is the external conditions. So that could be the climate you're living in. That could be something as simple as the music you intake. And then you've got this top level, which is the hack. So once the bottom two are sort of set, then the hacks.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a nice way of putting it. I'm a big fan of someone like Paul Chek as well, from the Chek Institute. And he also speaks along the sort of same points that you do with that base level pyramid. And he's got his 6 foundational principles, which are, nutrition, hydration, sleep, breathing, thinking, movement. These are things that, any human should, I think, naturally do. And, we do tend to do those things naturally. But like you were saying earlier, we sometimes get divorced from that. Why does that happen? Because these things should be sort of innate and basic with us. Do you think it's because of the hectic sort of schedule of life, or maybe technology? With the phone, it's keeping us up later into the wee hours when we should be sleeping, and with work schedules and picking up kids, taking them to extracurricular activities. We're all over the place and stressing out with work. And what are your thoughts as to why we're not sort of set in that base foundation that humans should be set in?
Well, I think it's some of the things you said, but it goes much deeper than that. I think, modern life certainly brings its challenges to self-care. It means you have to really be focused and intentional about how you're taking care of yourself. But I would say, first of all, definitely technology is affecting people's sleep and rest. I would definitely say that's true. But that's a much more specific thing, I think, to widen out. I think this disconnect that I'm talking about, and this sort of this less conscious and more negative way of looking at all of this has been going on much longer than we've had, I think, all of this technology. In some ways, I think at least for as long as I've been alive, I think it's very cultural, and in the sense that yes, we're busy, yes, there's distractions, but I think it's deeply embedded in the language and thinking that we sort of are born into. And where did that come from? Probably a lot of places, but I think, one finger to point would be, industry. I think that there's an awful lot of uh, advertising and marketing that goes into a lot of the focus and some of the education, even the supposed education. I think there's both well-meaning and non-well-meaning forces at play here. I think that a lot of medicine and healthcare, it means well, but again, they're sort of indoctrinated into that same negative language, sending people home to quote unquote lose weight, or lower this biomarker or raise this biomarker, and just keeping it really, you've got to change your habits, and making it very authoritarian and very just dry and grim. And I mean, as a trainer and a coach, when I look at the ways that my textbooks were, the ways that I was taught, fortunately I kind of broke out of it, but these ideas about patient adherence and client compliance, and it's like, geez, why do you talk like that? And so there's that, but that's on the well-meaning side, and then on the less probably well-meaning side, you have just industries that are geared around getting people to focus on the micro tweaks instead of the basic things. There's a lot of money that goes into promoting just really unhealthy food and other unhealthy habits and practices. So I think there are really a lot of complex forces at play. I think mostly just at this point it's become it's a paradigm. It's just the way that our culture sees health and fitness, and most everybody is born into it, and either as a consumer or as a health professional, or wherever you sit in the whole lexicon, there's these shared agreements, there's shared sort of supposed understandings. There's myths, there's misinformation, there are a lot of assumptions. Oh yeah, this is going to be really hard. It's not going to be fun because we have to eat healthy, and it's going to be really boring. And it's just a lot of assumptions. There's a lot of agreements and like that. And unless somebody suggests some other way, shows some other way, suggests that it can be some other way, and that you can shift out of that kind of thinking into a different way of seeing it, then people just stay stuck there. It's just once people are set in whatever ways are not supportive, yes, some of these things should come naturally, but they don't, because like you say, there are pressures that make it more challenging. But then there's that cultural way of thinking that keeps people stuck. Because if they want to shift, they assume it's going to be some way that it doesn't have to be. And they're like, it's hard for them to do it because like, oh, I've got to get on a diet regimen and a fitness plan, and and everybody supports that. Everybody's thinking that way. Everybody's speaking that way. And that's not true. You could actually just learn things and then integrate them into your life, intuitively based on what feels good and works for you. It's not that outside information isn't at all useful, but there's a way in which instead of being discerning, there's a lot of I hate to use such kind of crude words like bad, but there's just a lot of, unfortunate misinformation, a lot of confusion. So, there's that. I think another point I'll throw in there is that I don't think kids are educated very well about their bodies. We don't grow up learning how our bodies work. We don't grow up cultivating mostly a sense of loving and caring for our bodies. We learn about a lot of stuff that we probably don't need to know about, and then we're not really paying attention to the most important thing, which is this magnificent, magical, kind of miraculous vessel that we seem to be here in. And so, so there's a sort of ignorance that makes people pray for all the marketing and all of the diet thinking and that I'm talking about. And so it makes it very hard to shift. So those are some of my thoughts about why it is the way it is. But the good news is, I want I don't want to just be doomsday about it, because of course the thing that I'm excited about is that I've been seeing for decades is that it is possible to shift, just with any paradigm. It is possible to shift out of it. It's possible to see differently. It's possible to escape the matrix and see, step out of that and see what's really going on, what really matters, and become more discerning and see what's really true and get more in touch with your own needs and your own intuition, and start to break through some of these myths and about how healthy living has to be, and what you have to do, and then all the stuff about it's selfish to take care of yourself. And I think it is you were talking earlier about consciousness, and it is a consciousness shift. And that's, again, 70 to 80% of what I like to work on with people is shifting that consciousness. I literally have practices, like sort of contemplative practices that I have people do that basically are just designed to have people be bringing more attention to this conversation, like what we're having right now, more attention to, wow, what really matters to me? What's really important to me? What am I serving? What do I care about? What am I here for? And those might seem like very lofty things, but if you're actually in touch with them every day, and you're also in touch with, I also have practices around like really getting in touch with the awe and reverence for your own body. Like when you treasure something and you get the preciousness of it, it becomes much harder to trash it. It's just harder to mistreat something that you actually are connected, you're deeply connected to how valuable it is and how valuable you are and how valuable life is. And, to your point, I think when you're in our culture, there's a lot of rushing around and focusing on other things than that. But if we take a little time every day to contemplate that, it's amazing how people's choices actually change. People's choices can actually start to be driven by what matters to them and what's important, because they're thinking about it more. They're contemplating it more, and it's not separate anymore. It's not like buried. It's actually more felt and lived. And it's like you're standing there about to make a choice at a buffet, and it's not that it's like, oh, I can't have that, it's not on my diet. It starts to become, oh, you know what, I don't want that because that's not nourishing for me, and I matter, and I want to feel good and look good and be good, and people need me, and you know what I'm saying? It's a different conversation.
Yeah, and it needs two things, I would think. By that regard, it needs awareness and discipline, because from what you're saying, it almost gets systemic, because sometimes it is driven by the corporation monthly sales target rather than your personal monthly biomarkers, right? Which is very, and you need that awareness, that attention, because you almost have to reset yourself every day to bring yourself into the present now, to know what's happening around you, where you're being sort of led towards, because there is a magnet out there, right? That's pulling you, and you have to
Absolutely.
keep that in check. And you need that discipline, because even for myself, if I'm trying to have good nourishing food, which is important for my body in terms of nutrients, building strength, etc., to be honest, it's never ever going to taste as great as that bag of chips, because the chemicals they've put in that bag of chips, it's really hitting you, right? Like sort of in the brain and in the blood. So you really have to make a decision saying, you know what, this bag of chips is always going to taste better than the nourishing food. I just have to stop myself from going there, if that's what you want. And then over time, you get to sort of enjoy the taste of the nourishing food, where, like you're saying, you don't identify with the bag of chips. You get to a point where, you know what, I don't want it. Like a person who's a smoker and quits smoking cigarettes. At that
Exactly.
point, they're like, you know
Yeah.
what, I don't like the smell and the taste of cigarettes. You've made that shift in identity, where you no longer associate, with that which is not taking you down the correct path.
Right, right. Yeah, and this is really interesting conversation because there's a lot of subtlety there in just the example that you gave because so like yes and no. Like I want to affirm what you're saying because that can be the experience, especially at the beginning, and there absolutely are chemicals in many of these foods that are made to make them like addictive. So after some period of time not eating those foods, the just like any physical addiction, it does subside for a lot of people. So a lot of people, I have seen that happen where, some people say like, oh, well, that's always going to taste better to me. But there's an interesting phenomenon I've noticed as a coach and trainer, which is that people who have said that, and and it's different for different people maybe, and certainly your experience is your experience, but I do want to at least put out there the possibility that for some people, it literally, even with the addictive chemicals, it loses its appeal. It actually doesn't taste better anymore, either because that they've lost the physical addiction has gone away, or, and here's the more ninja part of it, the really cool part of it is that you've strengthened your desire to be nourished so full and so big that it literally doesn't taste as good anymore. Almost, it's a psychological effect. It's like like things like sugar. Sugar is a good example too, because it is very, I think it is physically addictive. At the same time, it tastes really good when you're used to it, and you get accustomed to things. You can get unaccustomed to things, but it can also become almost like a negative taste, even something you loved. When you learn, first of all, when you learn about what it is doing to you, there's something about that too. That having that information can be very empowering. And then when you've nurtured this passion in yourself to this connection to what matters to you, that becomes, it literally tastes better to you. It tastes better, like being, a lot of people say like being healthy or being fit or being lean tastes better than a cookie. And it like literally does. It starts to taste better. And so there are things in these processes and in these increases in awareness, like you were talking about, and consciousness, that actually can shift that relationship over time. I'm not going to say it happens overnight, but I can tell you, personally speaking, that I definitely ate those kinds of things when I was younger and loved them and thought that nothing would ever taste better than them. And you couldn't pay me to put those in my body anymore. They wouldn't even taste good to me. And it's not because I had to apply discipline. See, discipline to me personally, this is just my view. So I'm throwing it out there for your, perusal is, your consideration is, it's a diet thinking word. I mean, not that isn't, there's always value in things like, discipline has its place, I want to say. But the idea that, you're just going to have to get yourself to, buck up and have willpower and resist something. There's a possibility beyond that, which is that you're literally not going to want it. And so, it's just, and I've seen this happen over and over. I've seen this happen with alcohol with people that I've worked with who loved their wine. And they're like, I'm not going to stop drinking wine. I'm sorry. I'm like, okay. Here's the other thing. Here's another thing I'll throw in. I'm very hands off in the sense that I really don't create that psychological barrier that a lot of, I think our culture creates around, you tell someone they can't or shouldn't do something, they want it more. So I don't do that. I literally start with the premise that, hey, you can do anything you want. but you know what we're going to do? We're going to find out what you really want. And you know what? If what you really want is wine and chips and cake, then okay, but I want to explore with you, what else do you really want? Is there something maybe you want more? And we're going to have you pay attention to that a lot. We're going to have you think about it, contemplate it, journal about it every day. And I'll be damned if people don't, when they start giving more attention to that stuff, and I give them a little information like, here's a little primer on what alcohol actually does in the body. I'm not telling you it's bad or good. It's not a value judgment. It's just like, here's how it works. And you decide if you want to do that to your body.
Yeah.
Come back and talk next week. And what's interesting is, when people get that information, because this is another thing this culture does, right? It doesn't actually teach people how things work and what it does. They just tell people it's bad.
Yeah.
You shouldn't eat that, it's bad. You shouldn't eat that, you shouldn't drink that, it's bad. You shouldn't. It's like, I don't do that. I actually give people, I credit their intelligence. I say, look, I'm not going to give it a value judgment. I'm just going to say, this is what it's doing in your body. Is that cool with you? Cool, then do it. If it's not cool with you, maybe you don't want to do that anymore. And people, when they learn those things and they get connected to, my client who loved her wine and then realized, I don't feel good the next day. She's an important person. She does amazing nonprofit work in the world, and she's very powerful. And she realized how, she's leading meetings and giving talks. And she's, you know what? I don't sleep well when I drink, and then I don't feel good the next day, and I need to be my best, and I want to be. So now she drinks, a glass of wine once in a great while instead of, opening up a bottle every night. I didn't tell her to do that. I just educated her, and I had her do these practices. And over time, she chose. And this is my dream, that this is what could happen in our culture, is instead of haranguing people about how they should change, is that we have that conversation with people like I'm having, and people just choose.
And then there's more power because, it's much better to choose to change for yourself rather than someone else asking you
Absolutely.
to choose to change.
Yeah. It's very short-lived usually when you do it for somebody else, whether your doctor, your mother, your partner, it tends to be short-lived. It's outside of you. And it's negative. It's a should, as opposed to, somebody's wagging their finger at you, telling you what's bad and good. It's sort of like, it's really good to take a lot of this. There's so much value judgment around this bad food and good food. And it's like, it's not bad or good. It's just this one does this and that one does that. And you choose which outcome you want. There's a maturity about it. I call one of the practices I do is called mature authentic choice. I have these 5 consciousness practices. They're like meditations or contemplations. And the maturity piece is about, like what I was just saying, it's very well known in psychology. There is that sort of phenomenon where you restrict something and it creates cravings. You want it more, and let's lift that and let's just let people choose based on knowledge and kind of transformational encouragement. But the mature authentic choice piece is about, hey, you're a grown up. You can have anything you want, because there's a very adolescent relationship in our culture to all of this. I would say, Marianne Williamson is very famous for saying, she talks about this more generally, that, our culture is in its adolescence. And I have been saying that for decades, specifically related to this, that we have a sort of arms crossed, mommy told me to do this, so I'm not going to do it kind of thing. And it just sets up this resistance. And it's like, we need to sort of dismantle that and say, look, you're a grown up, do what you want. But let me explain to you what's happening, what is happening. And let me explain to you what, this works for this and that doesn't work for that. And, here's some education and here's some contemplation, let's get more deeply connected to what's really important to you, and then go live your life, live how you want to live. But if you do what I find, it sounds so simple in a way. People are like, that can't work. That's too simple. But it actually does work. It's just that nobody's doing it. Not nobody, but hardly anybody is approaching it this way. But it works,
And the ironic thing is that when you do make that shift, like you're saying, it's almost you're coming back full circle to the person who you originally were before you were led down the path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, before you got indoctrinated by culture, it really is like coming home more to you and to growing up. Like I said, it's a true adult who can say, I want and need to take really great care of myself, because I'm taking ownership of my life and this body. And not only myself, it's not selfish because I am here, I affect other people and other things. And so I can't give my best. It's another thing I really work with people a lot on. A lot of people have that thing going on about, oh, it's so self-centered to put myself first. It's like, no, it's not. It's really selfish to take crappy care of yourself, because when you're run down and beat up and you're worn out, you're bringing your B game to everything that you do and everything that matters to you. Is that so unselfish? No, that's not unselfish. And if heaven forbid something happens to you, if you get sick, not that any of us can have a guarantee, but we can certainly better, we can do all we can for our odds. It's not selfish at all to do everything you can to bring your best. And there's some responsibility in that, I think.
Yeah. And that'll definitely lead, like you say, to be deeply, happily living exceptionally healthy for life, for good, joy fueled.
That's it.
That's you.
There you have it.
No, that's great. I mean, thanks again for coming on this episode and sharing your thoughts with us.
Absolutely.
And if people want to get a hold of you, where's the best place for them to reach you and your work?
So robynlandis.net, and maybe on the we can put a comment below on the podcast. You can just share the website. And if you like, I can also give you a link where people can download that pyramid. It's up to you, but I actually have, it's a handout. I have that pyramid designed as a handout. And if people would like to see that pyramid, if you'd like to see it, happy to send it to you. You can post it, whatever you like. But I have a link where people can download it. So, but yeah, Robyn Landis, ROBYNLANDIS.net.
Okay, amazing. No, I'd love to post that link. And thanks again for coming on the episode, and I wish you well.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.